Are you interested in playing a deck that overwhelms the opposition with endless amounts of damage coming from your space, your ground, and your leader? If that sounds like something you're interested in, then you've come to the right place, because this Boba Fett deck is absurd with the amount of damage it puts out. For this deck to put all this damage out, Boba Fett looks to harness effect damage from your ground units, your space units, and even your events to overwhelm the opposition. But one very quick thing before we jump into the leader, the base, and well, the deck itself. If you enjoy StarWarsUnlimited content, then make sure to like and subscribe, because I'm constantly posting out new decks, and gameplay videos are coming soon, and I don't want you guys to miss out. So, Boba Fett, what does he do? So, he's got a really nice ability. It reads, when you deal non-combat damage, you may exhaust this leader. If you do 1 indirect damage to a player. The reason that is so good is because 90% of our deck pings effect damage. So when any of those go off, you can then activate Boba to do an additional 1. For example, our First Order Stormtrooper here, on attack, does 1 indirect damage. So First Order Stormtrooper, when he attacks, does the 2 and the 1 indirect, but then Boba activates, giving it another 1 indirect, essentially making a 1 cost hit for 4. Boba also has a lot of power when he deploys. So he deploys on 6, and you've got 2 options. You can either deploy him on the ground as a 4/7 unit with no abilities. It's alright. You're not always going to do that, but it can come up to win you some games, because it definitely has for me. But more importantly, you can attach him to a vehicle. When you deploy him as a pilot, he reads, when deployed as an upgrade, deal up to 4 damage, divided as you choose among any number of units, while also giving that unit +4 attack and +4 health. The best way to think of this Boba is kind of like a mini overwhelm barrage for 4 damage. But one thing you're really looking to do when you deploy him as a leader is, on your 6 resources, you can play out your Fett's Fire Spray. You can ready this up if you have Boba or Jango Fett as a leader or unit. So you ready up your Fett's Fire Spray, then you can attach your Boba onto the Fett's Fire Spray. Meaning, on your 6 resource turn, you can have a 9/10 unit that is readied and do that 4 damage to clear something off. It's insane! For our base, we've gone yellow just because there's a lot of strong cards that support Boba in yellow, like the Fett's Fire Spray, so why wouldn't I? And also, I had to go more sizey because, well, of course, it's Boba, Underworld, Jabba, like, you had to. That's our base and our leader done. Let's crack on to these ground units. Kicking things off for the ground units is a 1 cost, you've already seen it, that is free, First Order Stormtrooper. This card is a lovely turn 1 play for us. It's got 2 attack, 1 health that reads, on attack and when defeated, deal 1 indirect damage to a player. So like I mentioned earlier, this pairs beautifully with the leader Boba, because you can attack with First Order, then the on attack happens, so you do 1 indirect damage somewhere, then Boba activates, meaning you can do another 1 indirect damage, and then the attack goes through for 2. So you do 4 damage with a single card on your turn 2. It's crazy! You might find they start putting all this indirect damage onto units early on and then leave them with 1 health, but then they quickly realise they're in trouble when you keep pinging out all this damage. Moving on to our 2 costing ground units, we've got 3 Allegiant General Pride. This card is a 2/3 stat line that reads, when indirect damage is dealt to a unit, you may defeat a non-unique upgrade on it, which is beautiful in this deck, by the way, because 90% of our deck does that indirect damage, meaning if they pick something for shield, you can actually defeat the shield. But the main reason he's in here is because here, on attack, if you have the initiative, do 2 indirect damage to a player. You know what I'm going to say? So you have the initiative and you attack and do 2 indirect damage. You can then activate Boba, giving it another damage, and then his attack goes through for 5 damage for a 2 costing unit. And don't forget, you can also defeat non-unique upgrades if they pick a unit. It's so good. We're actually going to jump straight to our 4 costing ground units, because we don't actually run too many ground units in this deck. But what we do run are very good, such as our 2 Dengars. So there's a 5/4 stat line on the ground, which, you know, quite decent. But this is the more important part. Piloting for only 2 cost. Attached unit gains on attack, do 2 indirect damage to a player. If this unit is an Underworld unit, deal 3 indirect damage to a player instead. Well, we got a lot of Underworld, so that's going to happen more than you think. Not just that, also gives it 1 attack and 2 health. And well, don't forget with Boba, gives it another +1, so essentially you do 4 indirect damage per attack. Phew. Moving on to our next ground unit, and it's a 5 cost. We want to run 2 IG-88s. So it's a ground unit with 4 attack, 5 health, which reads, when an enemy unit is damaged, this unit gets +3. So 99% of the time within this deck, you're basically playing out a 7 attack, 5 health ground unit. honestly, you always get that boost within his attack. Because you're dishing out this absurd amount of indirect damage, there's a high chance they're going to pick at least one unit for that damage to go on to. So essentially, they've always got a damage unit. And not just that, he's also a pilot. So for 2 costs again, attach unit gains when an enemy unit is damaged, this unit gets +3. Also gives it +3 health. No damage boost, which is a shame. But that +3, yet again, is more than enough. Gonna be honest, when I play this deck, I don't use IG all the time, but he can swing games just with that absurd boost he can give out of nowhere. I also found it's actually 50-50 if I play him as a pilot or a ground unit, because don't underestimate the power of just playing out a 7 attack ground unit within 5 resources. This really gets your opposition thinking, because if they don't deal with it or lose their damage unit, then they just lose. And moving on to our next ground unit, which is also our final ground unit, and that is 2 Boba Fett's. So this unit is a 5/4 stat line with shielded. So that's actually quite a solid card coming down on your 5 resources. However, he has got piloting again, so for 2 costs, you may play it as an upgrade. When you do 1 damage to a unit. If attached unit is a transport, you may do 2 damage instead. Also gives it 2 attack, 3 health, but of course, this will activate our leader Boba to go off, doing another 1 damage. Similar to IG, it's actually 50-50 if I play this onto a space unit on the ground. Please don't underestimate having a shielded 5 attack unit. That can put in some serious work for you. So even though we haven't got many ground units, and well, most of them have got pilots on it, don't always look to do them as pilots, because like I said, when I showed each card off, they can do some serious work for you on the ground. Okay, let's move on to our space units. Kicking things off, the space units is a 2 cost, that's 3 TIE Bombers. So this card reads, on attack, do 3 indirect damage to the defending player. But of course, this would trigger Boba to go off. Essentially, you're always doing 4 indirect damage. This card can put an absurd amount of work in for you. Early game, you might just keep picking like 1 damage to the base and 2 to a unit, and then you're not really doing a lot. However, it really adds up, because you'd be surprised how long this tends to live. Not just that, if you do end up putting a pilot on it, this card gets absurd. It gets quite beefy, quite strong, and before the opposition knows it, this card alone's putting like 16 damage onto them. Moving on to our next 2 costing space unit, it's 3 Zygerian Starhoppers. This card's a 2/3 stat line, it's alright, but more importantly, when defeated, deal 2 indirect damage to a player. So with Boba, that's 3 indirect damage, and well, it's just an alright stat line. However, if you notice, it is Underworld, so of course you can equip Dengar onto it, meaning this will then start doing 3 indirect damage per attack. I find most of the time with this card, I'm actually just using it to trade into units and then hitting off that indirect damage, because this will actually defeat most early space units they play out, and then being able to do that 3 indirect damage on top of that. Whew, it's so valuable for this deck. Moving on to our 3 costing space units, we're going to start things off with 3 droid missile platforms. So this card is a 4 attack, 2 health stat line that reads, when defeated, deal 3 indirect damage to a player. So with Boba, of course, that's 4. It's just quite a strong space unit to have out there. That 4 attack can trade into some actually quite good things. Not just that, you'll find that lots of the time they won't defeat it because they're afraid of that 3 indirect damage becoming 4 with Boba, so this actually ends up putting a lot of damage into their base. With that being said, compared to the other 3 costing space units we're about to go over, I don't use it as much as you may think. I'm just going to say, by the way, this is one of the best cards to put your IG-88 onto, because it gives it the 3 health, meaning a 4/5 stat line, and you get normally that 3 attack, making it a 7/5 space unit. Moving on to our next 3 costing space unit is a card that you might get PTSD from all the Boba Fett decks, but Jango's gone, guys. You can stay nice and calm. He's gone. And that is 3 Elite P-38 Starfighters. Even with Jango gone, this card is still so good. So it's a 3 attack, 2 health stat line that reads, when played and when defeated, you may deal 1 damage to a unit. So that 1 damage to a unit will activate our Boba Fett, meaning this can come down, you pick 1 damage somewhere, and then Boba on top of it. Whew. And our last 3 costing space unit is one you always want to look to pilot, just because if you get 1 pilot onto this, it's such an issue for them. That is 3 Lurking TIE Phantoms is back. So this card is a 2 attack, 2 health with Ray 2, so when it attacks it hits for 4, but more importantly, this unit can't be captured, damaged or defeated by enemy card abilities. Because of that effect of this card, you want to look to pilot it. If you get Dengar onto this, it starts hitting for like 5 damage and does the indirect. This card isn't quite as good as what it was, because there's quite a few cards out there now that can defeat this, or exhaust it. However, it's still absurdly good, and if you get the right pilot onto this at the right time, it can win you games on its own. Moving on to our 4 cost and space units, we've got 2 Commogular Heavy Fighter. I've probably butchered that name. So this card has a 3/4 stat line for 4, which isn't great. However, when played, deal 3 indirect damage to a player. Exhaust each unit damaged this way. If you time this card correctly, it can win you games for the sheer reason of, if it's really close, they've got a lot of damage on their base, the last thing they want is you just playing the card and do 3 damage to it. So they actually end up picking their units, meaning you can't exhaust them. The reason there's only 2 of them in here and not 3 is because, well, like I said, you have to time this card perfectly, and getting it early game isn't always the time to activate it. So I just found I'd much rather see like a P38, a Lurking Ties, or a next 4 cost a lot more. Talking of our next 4 cost, let's go over it. That is 3 Fett's Fire Spray. I absolutely adore this card. So it's a 4 attack, 4 health that reads, when played and on attack, deal 1 indirect damage to a player. If you control Boba Fett, deal 2 indirect damage instead. We do control Boba Fett, so it's always going to be doing that 2 indirect damage, and you can activate Boba on top of it, essentially meaning it's doing 3 indirect damage every turn, meaning this 4 cost and space unit is going to do 7 damage a turn. It's so good. Like, it's actually ridiculous how good this card is within this deck. If you haven't got presence on the board, or maybe you're starting to fall on the back a little bit, this card on its own would give you presence, will start clawing you back into that game. Moving on to our 6 cost and space units, and we got 3 Ruthless Raiders. Of course, this is a staple within any red villainy deck. 4 attack, 6 health, but more importantly, when played and when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. So yet again, that effect activates Boba, meaning you can do additional damage on top of that. I found within this deck, this card was amazing at just a bit of removal. Because you're doing indirect damage all the way up to this turn, normally they got a lot of units with a lot of damage on, so just suddenly playing this out and just pinging something off the board and getting that additional one from Boba normally ends up meaning you do 3 damage to base and 2 to a unit, which is just so good. And of course, it comes out in your 6 resources. That is when Boba can come out, so you can actually equip Boba onto your Ruthless Raider. I wouldn't recommend it. I'll try and put that Boba onto one of your Fett's Fire Sprays, because it's just ridiculous, that combo. I said one of your Fett's Fire Spray. That's because our next 6 cost is another Fett's Fire Spray. Now, this is a card you want to put your Boba leader onto. Why? So it's 5 attack, 6 health that reads, when played, if you control Boba Fett or Jango Fett as leader or unit, ready this unit. So, of course, you're going to play it out, boom, it's ready. You all know how good this card is. It's also got an action that reads, pay 2, exhaust a non-unique unit. I don't think I've ever actually used that ability, but it's there if you need it. This card really is your finisher. Just playing this out, readying it up, equipping Boba onto it, doing 4 damage, popping something off the board, and then you've got a 9 attack ship ready that turn. Like, it's just ridiculous. One thing you commonly see against this deck though, is that on the 6 resources, people will wait for this card. So you can actually use that to bait things out the hands, like maybe a Rivals 4 or something. This card really is amazing, just please be aware, people are going to be waiting for it, so you can use that to your advantage. So that's our space units done, let's crack on to these events and upgrades. Kicking things off with events and upgrades is a 1 cost, and we want to run 3 Daring Raids. This card simply reads deal 2 damage to a unit or base. However, with Boba, you're essentially doing 3 damage to a unit or base. My favourite thing to do with this card by far is turn 1, you play your First Order Stormtrooper out, let them do whatever, then you go Daring Raid, normally defeating their turn 1 play and doing 1 indirect damage to base, meaning going to turn 2, they've got no unit, damage your base, and you're a unit up. Honestly, getting to trigger your leader off this card is so good. You're paying 1 for 3 damage. Talking of doing damage is our next event upgrade, which is a 2 cost, and we want to run 2 of these that are 2 shoot downs. This card reads deal 3 damage to a space unit. If that unit is defeated this way, you may deal 2 damage to a base. This card, turn 2 against a space deck, is just not fair, because you defeat their turn 1 play, you do 2 damage to their base, and then you activate Boba doing another 1 damage to their base. You may be thinking, wow, that's amazing. Why aren't you running 3 of these? That's because you don't always get the pure value of this card, because you're not always playing space decks, or they might not play an early space unit, meaning this can't defeat something. However, throughout the game, if they're just picking their space units putting direct damage on, you'll find their space units won't have much health, so then suddenly surprising them with this is so good. Moving on to our next 2 cost event and upgrade is 2 No Good To Me Dead. You all know how good this card is. So you can exhaust a unit. This unit can't ready this round. So essentially you're taking a unit out for 2 turns. This card is basically your, you played your leader, well you can't attack with it for 2 turns. It's so important for this deck, just in case they do get out that really big unit or their leader and it's just a bit too overwhelmed for you. Just saying no for 2 turns is good. The reason we don't run 3 of them though is because we want to be on that front foot doing the damage, and well, if we keep drawing this, we can't do that damage. So all going to be on the front foot and doing damage is our next 2 costs. We want to run 3 surprise strikes. So this card is good anyway, but in this deck, oh my word. So your attack with unit, it gets +3 for this attack. The reason that is so good is because you attack with your 4 cost and Fett's Fire Spray. That's 4 attack for its card, plus this 3, that's 7, and the 3 effect damage. Your Fett's Fire Spray is doing 10 damage. This is another one of your finishers. This deck has so many of them, that's why it's so good. The main time I play this card is typically on my 5 resource turn, because I typically by that point have got a Lurking Tie out or a Fett's Fire Spray, activate Surprise Strike, hit for 7, and then you still got 3 resources to play a P38 or another Lurking Tie, or your Droid Missile Platform. Yeah, it's just so good. And rounding up our main deck is a 3 cost, and that is 2 Waylays. It's in here just for that disruption, because what to do? Return a non-leader unit to its owner's hand. Because we run a lot of 3 costing, 2 costing units, we can get this out early and still play units, so they normally play out something quite big. Boom, get out to your hand. Oh, by the way, I'm still going to play out lots of units. I just love this card. I think it's super powerful, especially for this deck. Similar to our No Good To Me Deads, even though this card is so good and super strong, we don't want to run 3, it's because we want to be on that front foot. So if we're getting lots of cards like Waylay and No Good To Me Dead in our hand, well, we can't do that. We're kind of being stalled up ourselves. That's our main deck done. Let's crack on to the side deck. Kicking things off the side deck is a 1 cost, and that is Electromagnetic Pulse. It'll do damage to a droid or vehicle unit and exhaust it. This is really good for when you are going into space heavy decks. You can either drop this for another shoot down, it's up to you. I just kind of put it in here just because I want to use it and it looks gorgeous, really. Our next 1 cost is 3 Confiscates. So this card, Defeat and Upgrade, is in here for when you play against those pilot decks, but also Frozen Carbonite is a super annoying card, especially against us, so if we just play this out and pop it off, no issue. Moving on to our 3 cost and events and upgrades, we've got our 3rd Waylay. So even though I said we like to be on the front foot, if you are playing the deck that's slowing you up, and you're going into a game 2, game 3, and it is getting to late resources, no harm in having enough bit of disruption for you. Talking if they're playing something a little bit too annoying, it's our next one, and that's 3 Open Fires. This card reads, deal 4 damage to a unit. And with Boba, essentially you have 5 damage out for 3 resources. This is in here, yet again, if they're playing something a bit too big, or a Sentinel is kind of a bit annoying, play this out, pop it off, and activate Boba on top of that. And rounding up our side deck is a 5 cost, and we want to run 2 of these. That's 2 Commandeers. This card reads, take control of a non-leader vehicle unit that costs 6 or less without a pilot on it. If you do, ready it. At the start of your next regroup phase, return that unit to its owner's hand. This can swing games. If they play out a big space unit that's kind of an issue, play it out, steal it, ready it, attack, then it goes to the hand. Like, the value it gives you is kind of crazy. Again, this kind of in here if you need another finisher, so maybe playing a deck that's kind of close, and you've realised they're playing a lot of vehicle units, just kind of steal it and win the game yourself. Make it your finisher instead of theirs. And with that, that's our side deck and main deck done. Here is the deck list for those who want it. For final thoughts and matchups, this is a really strong deck and a really fun deck. I found this deck, I'm happy to take on anything. I'm happy to take on aggro, mid-range and control, because if you get the right cards, you can kind of take down any of them. The main 2 things I have noticed though is if you're playing against a control and they're hitting all the right bits of removal and the right bits of healing, you can struggle because all of a sudden an Avenger comes down and a Snoke and it can hurt. However, I tend to beat them more than I lose to them just because of the amount of damage you put out and how quickly you put out. And the only time aggression's an issue is if they play out a lot of units with a lot of health, just because they put their indirect damage onto their units while still attacking, and then before you know it, all their units have got like 1 HP, but they put like 20 damage onto your base. But yet again, I've actually beaten aggression more than I've lost to it. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about this deck and any changes you may make. Don't forget to comment what decks I should make next. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I shall catch you in the next one.